Okay, I'm going to create a video for us so I can clear up some questions that I've been getting a little bit more towards the proficiency scales. One of the things I think that will help us out is to know big picture, how are these proficiency scales going to end up helping us when we start looking at assessments and how we end up utilizing assessments to help collect data to help us teach what we're going to do here. So one of the things that I did, it's actually probably easier to think about this for my brain as a math example first. So if I have a second grade math sample here or standard, one of the standards is using place value, understanding properties of operations and to add and subtract. So using place values including tens and the hundreds. So one of the things that we did with this standard was we created our I can statements here. I can use place values to set up an equation. I can add and subtract using place values for two-digit numbers. You could also have one in here for I can add and subtract using place values for three-digit numbers. So what we did with this proficiency scale is we utilized these, and then we actually started looking at a description of an activity that we could do here. So these were just super easy little pieces where we have two-digit addition, two-digit subtraction. We should be able to tell pretty quickly if a student is able to do these two things just by looking at these 5 bullet points here. If they're able to do these things easily, great. That means that they're either at a 3 or a 4. If they're not able to do these things quickly or easily, depending on the standard, they're either at a 2 or a 1. So now it just makes it a little bit simpler of, okay, once I have this 3 in here and what is going to be proficient, how do I want them to go above and beyond? So going above and beyond that standard, instead of going into like a third grade math standard, what I could do is just start figuring out ways that we could do an analysis or synthesis of your own information. So one of the ways they could do that is I can use place value to set up an equation from real world story problems like the ones we have here, and analyze word problems to help me identify if I need to add or subtract. So these are ways that they can go above the standard, and then this would be a way to help us identify to see if they're developing. So on their own, they can add and subtract single place values or single digit numbers, and then same thing, and that would be on their own. And then emerging, so if they're at a 1, would be with help or partial understanding with an adult helping, they're able to add and subtract these single digit numbers. So that would tell us specifically where a student was at with that specific standard. So like I said, it makes it a little bit cleaner to look at a math standard first. So now what we're doing is taking a look at like a third grade standard for reading for informational text. One of the things that they want to do is compare and contrast the most important points and key details presented in two texts about the same topic. So what third grade did was they were able to identify their I can statements that they got at the very beginning when we broke down what those standards are wanting us. So it's the same I can statement. So now they started to figure out, okay, what does this activity look like? How do we know that these students have these two I can statements? So they started to figure out, well, we could use a Venn diagram to compare the similarities of two different articles in the same topic, citing references, using a Venn diagram to contrast it. And then what they also did was they linked common assessments to the document. So they actually have a link here to a Venn diagram for them to be able to use later. The other thing they have is a couple articles to be able to help them identify what the benefits of living near a grocery store would be, and same thing, why gardening is better than buying produce. So they're able to use those standards to help them identify, okay, are we at a 3 or are we potentially at a 2? Are they recognizing and recalling? They are doing it in two different articles of the same topic, citing one relevant point in comparison. In the proficient, they ask for 4, and then same thing for 4 differences, and then citing 2 relevant points of comparison. So, if they're at a 2, the team has decided using their teacher discretion and their professional capital that 1 point of comparison and 2 points of contrasting would be at the 2 level. And then if it's probably somewhere in the middle of that, they would always defer to maybe a 2, and then once they're able to fully reach that standard of getting 2 relevant points and then 4 relevant points of contrast, then they're able to identify, yep, we're at a 3. And then same thing, they have yet to finish this one, but they're going to have the same thing. Student can, with support, identify these different things. So that would be something that they would utilize to help them identify if they're at a 1. And then one of the things that they did, okay, in order for us to go beyond the standard, when they decided if a student researched an article on the same topic and identified how they can compare and contrast the articles, that is going beyond the standard. It's not going to a 4th grade standard, it's just going above what they were asked to do in the specific 3rd grade standard that is still possible for them to do. The other thing that I like that 3rd grade did here, they're reading for informational text, but depending on what this topic is, these also could be potentially meet a social study standard. If you're talking about living near a grocery store, or talking about creating why gardening is better than going to a grocery store, that could meet a 3rd grade social studies standard, or depending on the way that the topic is being met or what they're reading, it could also be a science standard. So that's it. It's a good example of how you can use these to be versatile and not just specifically meet one standard in one specific realm of reading. These do end up helping us meet standards in other areas as well. So that's an example by 3rd grade. Again, if you need more examples on the math, I can come describe it with you. But really, what the purpose of this is to help us start getting to know how the assessment that we're going to create is going to look like. Some assessments are going to be real clean and simple like this, where you can have a Venn diagram and they're able to say, yep, we've got our 4 relevant contrasts, we've got our 2 comparisons, these are really easy. Or it could be something as big as this, where I actually have this printed out from a resource that I have, where we created it as a team on our own. Or it could be something as simple as a checklist. We were looking at a kindergarten standard the other day, and the kindergarten standard was actually much easier to be able to identify if we had a checklist, and that would be a teacher discretion. So you're able to use your own professional capital to identify if a student has met or not met the standard.